You may proceed, Ms. Sargent.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you please state your name for the record?
Carmen Asham,
And please spell your first and last name.
Carmenasham.
You are the state's case agent in this matter, is that correct?
Correct.
Where are you employed?
City of Minot Police Department.
In what capacity?
Currently, I'm a sergeant in the Investigations Division
How long have you held the rank of sergeant?
since June of 2023.
And prior to that, what was your rank?
Master Officer.
You said your current assignment is investigations, is that right?
Correct.
How long have you been in investigations?
This time since the end of January 2025.
And prior to that, what was your assignment?
I was a patrol sergeant
And how long were you a patrol sergeant?
from the fall of 2023 to January 2025.
And where were you prior to patrol?
Prior to that patrol sergeant position, I was in investigations as a detective.
And how long had you been in investigations at that point?
That time I was in investigations for 5 years, from 2018 to 2023.
Now, it sounds like a lot of bouncing around. Can you explain why you went from investigations to patrol back to investigations?
So in our department, we are limited to a certain number of ranking officers in specific divisions. So in particular, in investigations, we only have 2 sergeant positions. So there can only be 2 sergeants assigned to investigations at any time.
Okay. So when you attained the rank of sergeant, you had to transfer out
Correct.
because the spots had already been filled. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so it's come to the time that you have now transferred back to investigations.
Yes.
Okay. Can you please tell us about your training and experience?
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree from Minot State University, and then law enforcement specific, I have over 1,800 hours of peace officer standards training through the state of North Dakota. Over 300 of those hours are specific to evidence and crime scene collection, or crime scene investigation, excuse me.
Okay. Do you have any affiliation with the Crime Scene Recovery Unit with Minot PD?
Yes, we have a crime scene response unit with the Minot Police Department. I've been a member of that team since 2013, and I've been the commander of the crime scene response unit since 2016.
What kind of cases do you usually investigate?
Any type of case. We don't really have specific assignments in our division. So I can investigate anything from a sexual assault to, fraud, theft, homicide.
Approximately how many homicides have you investigated during your career?
I've been the lead detective on, I believe, 3 homicides, and then I've been involved in anywhere to 5 to 8 additional that I've been involved in as the crime scene unit.
Okay. You were assigned as an investigator on this case, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. When did you receive that assignment?
The first assignment was in 2019 in the fall. Detective Talbot and I were tasked with familiarizing ourselves with the case.
Okay. And what did familiarizing yourselves with the case entail?
So we were able to, at that time, take a break from our regular caseload so we could concentrate on this case because there is such a vast array of documents and evidence to review for this case. So what we did was we read through as much as we could. We spent some time trying to make sure we knew where all of the evidence was located. We learned that some of the evidence was still being stored down at the State Crime Lab in Bismarck, so we made arrangements to get that transferred back to the Minot Police Department. And then we worked with our evidence tech to go through and make sure all of the evidence was properly logged into our computer system because at the time, if you could imagine in 2007, 2008, there really wasn't much digital happening as far as the case went. So everything was analog. So we had to make sure that in the interim over the years that evidence had properly been documented into our computer system.
And what did you find when you went to do making sure that everything was logged properly into evidence?
It was a challenge. There was a lot of stuff that we couldn't find. We went through and noticed we had several reports from BCI, for example, but we had no corresponding audio for any of those reports if they did interviews for us. So we had to try and track down as much of it as we could.
Okay. Approximately how many pages of documents did you go through?
I couldn't even say. There was thousands of pages.
Okay. How many hours approximately of audio and video recordings?
Hundreds of hours.
Photographs?
Yes. There were, I don't even know, 100 or so maybe.
Now, Detective, when you go through an investigation, you review the evidence. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I want to kind of draw your attention to certain pieces of evidence in this case and then discuss these. We've heard testimony that Anita was stabbed and that a knife was recovered from the scene, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is the knife in evidence?
Yes.
Okay. Can you please describe the knife?
I would describe it as a cheap folding knife. Something that is common for a lot of people to carry. It had a embossed design on the handle on both sides.
During your course of your investigation, were you able to determine how common of a knife this was?
So we had done some research and reviewed. It was, I mean, a quick Google search and you could find it was easy to come across online. It sounded like it was kind of a novelty knife that would have been possibly sold in gas stations or maybe flea markets, that type of thing. We also found that there were a wide variety of styles of the knife from the same manufacturer.
Okay. And were you able to determine if there's anything really special of this knife or if this was a good quality knife?
No, it wasn't particularly expensive or unique in any way.
And to be clear, when I say the knife is in evidence, it's being housed at Minot PD. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And where in Minot PD is it being housed?
Our evidence storage is in it's a secured, fenced-in area, I guess, in our garage bay, that it's fully secured and only accessible by the evidence clerk.
Okay. Is it monitored by cameras and?
Yes.
Okay. We've also heard some testimony about the screen. During the course of your investigation, what did you learn about where the screen was originally on the morning of June 4th, 2007?
We learned that Marty Annell, in his statements, he had said specifically.
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
Your Honor, we've heard numerous testimony about this already.
Yeah, I'm going to give a little leeway here, Mr. Sand, so your objection's overruled. Try to keep it tight, Ms. Organ.
Yes, Your Honor.
He stated that the screen was recovered out of the window of the apartment.
Now, Sergeant Ashton, you're familiar with the crime scene video for this, of the apartment, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You've watched that?
Yes.
You were in court when that was viewed as well?
Yes.
Okay. And you're also familiar with the crime scene photographs, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Would you describe the condition of Anita's bedroom, particularly with regards to the area around the window?
Yeah. It was a particularly small room. I mean, the apartment itself was pretty small. Her bedroom was maybe 9 feet by 10 feet, approximately. She had her single bed in the corner, which was in the southwest corner of the room. The end of the bed came up right up to the edge of the window in question. And then you could see in the photographs from the crime scene that at the foot of the bed, underneath the window, there was a lot of items piled up there. There was a couple of fabric bins, you know, those square bins that you store things in, that were there. There was, you know, maybe a laundry basket. There was just several things there. And then on top of all of that, there was a open package of plasticware, forks, knives, that sort of stuff that was just kind of precariously perched on top of one of the fabric bins. So all of this stuff was just on the floor at the foot of the bed, right underneath the window.
Okay. And how would you describe it in its position on the floor?
It was kind of a jumbled mess. You could see clearly defined things like the bins, like I said, and the plasticware, but then there was just other things just strewn about there.
Okay. Did it appear to you to have been stacked, or was it just kind of tossed there?
A lot of the things were just stacked on top of one another.
Okay. Now, you also examined photographs of the windowsill, is that right?
Yes.
Please describe the condition of the windowsill.
The windowsill was unremarkable. There was no tool marks, no damage noted. There was no, there was dust in the window. There was cobwebs around it. Pretty unremarkable.
Okay. Dust and cobwebs, particularly where?
Outside of the window on the, where the siding was.
Now, Detective, you also had an opportunity to review the video of the reenactment, is that right?
Yes.
And were you able to see the damage to the screen that was caused in the test, on the test screen in that video?
No.
Okay. How would you compare the screen from the test video with the actual screen that we saw in the photographs that were provided?
Your Honor, my understanding, she just said no, and I don't understand the follow-up question.
Ms. Sorgan.
I'm going to back up a little bit then. Reestablish there. Okay. Sergeant Asham, you were able to observe the screen in that video, correct?
Yes.
All right. And were you able to see the condition of it from that video?
Yes.
Okay. Did you then compare the condition of that screen to what you saw in the photographs of the screen that was actually provided by Marty and Al?
Yes.
Okay. How do the two compare?
The actual screen from the crime scene was more damaged than the screen from the reenactment video.
Okay. And what did that tell you?
That, to me, the damage was most likely not from the same activity that was portrayed in the reenactment video.
Okay. And you saw Sergeant Thompson trying to get in and out of that window, correctly?
Yes.
Okay. How would you describe his actions in getting in and out of that window?
Clumsy.
Did you have an opportunity to observe the actual screen?
Yes.
Okay. What was your understanding of the cut to that screen?
The understanding to me, and as it was described, as the cut was the shape of a backwards L if you were standing outside the window looking in.
Okay. What, if anything, was in that cut?
Reports from the state lab after that was sent to them indicated that Anita's blood was found in the cut of that screen.
What does that indicate to you?
To me, that tells me that that cut was made after the stabbing.
Okay. And what does that tell you about the point of entry?
That was not the point of entry to the apartment.
What did your investigation determine was the point of entry?
The door, the front door.
And you were present for Laura Knapp's testimony with regards to the keys, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And the type of lock that was?
Yes.
During the course of your investigation, were you able to determine who had keys to that apartment?
Yes.
Who?
Anita had a key, Nichole had a key, Laura Knapp had a key, and Marty and Al had a key.
And were Laura and Marty's keys accounted for, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, they were, yes.
Okay. How about Anita's keys?
Yes, they were in her purse.
Is there some indication of what happened with Anita's keys?
Yeah, on the evidence log, the purse was collected as evidence, And then in the chain of custody, it notates that approximately a week to 10 days after the crime, the keys were returned to Gordon Knutson by Detective Barnard.
Did you do some investigation with regards to whether or not it was possible for someone to have duplicated the key?
Yes.
And what did you learn through the course of that investigation?
So we're probably all familiar now that kiosks exist where you can take a key and get your own copy made. So I was curious if that was a possibility in 2007. And I learned that it was not, that those machines were not patented until 2007, and they didn't have a nationwide rollout of the machines until 2010.
Sergeant Asham, in your review of the case, were you able to determine if there were any indications of a robbery?
There were not.
Okay. In fact, Sergeant, you were present for Sergeant Goodman's testimony, correct?
Correct.
Okay. His indication there didn't seem to have been some kind of a struggle?
Objection leading, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Sergeant Asham, were you able to determine if there had been any indications of a sexual assault?
According to the autopsy report, no, there was no indication of sexual assault.
Now, a lot of what you poured over in review was reports of past officers, is that right?
Correct.
Do you know approximately how many people they interviewed?
Hundreds of people were interviewed.
What other investigative tools did officers use?
In addition to the interviews they did, they took DNA samples from many of the people.
Okay. Approximately how many people did they take DNA samples from?
Around 60. I know it was over 50.
And do you know if the crime scene was dusted for fingerprints?
Yes.
Okay. So particularly in what areas?
From the photos, I saw that the window, around the window, was dusted for fingerprints.
Were there any usable prints to your knowledge?
There were not.
Okay. Now, Sergeant, as part of this investigation as well, you also reviewed Anita's phone records, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And that was mostly from an analysis of her phone, is that right?
Correct. We had her actual phone, which was recovered at the scene, and there were photographs taken of text messages, incoming, outgoing, phone logs, and then we also had copies of phone bills, which at the time actually also listed call logs.
Okay. Permission to approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Me up, Ms. Hosland? You got me? Okay, great. Sergeant, I need to refer to my notes so that I make sure that I've got the right information here. Okay. Sergeant, showing you what's been received into evidence as States Exhibits 11A and 11B. What are these?
These are photos taken from Anita's phone of her text messages.
Okay. And going through her phone, what were you able to determine was the last text message that she sent?
That would be this one marked 11A, where she sent a text message that said, "I didn't know what to say to it."
And do you know what time that was sent?
That was sent at, I believe it was 4:49 a.m. or about that time on Sunday, June 3rd.
Okay. What is 11B?
11B is a message that she received that was received at 4:53 a.m. That in her phone it showed as unread, and it's a message that just said, "You don't say anything."
Okay. Had all of her prior text messages been read before that point?
Yes,
Okay. Was that the first unread message?
yes.
How would you describe Anita's text activity in the early morning hours of June 3rd, 2007?
It was consistent. There were no gaps. It seemed to be on par with other days of text messages that were on there. It was a consistent conversation she was having until up to that point.
Sergeant, did you also analyze or look at Anita's phone activity, her actual verbal communications on the phone?
Yes.
And what did you find?
I saw that she had a phone conversation that lasted 10 or 11 minutes, just a little bit before 2 a.m. on Sunday, June 3rd.
Okay. And did you contact the person with whom that phone call occurred?
I did have contact with that person, and he had also been interviewed previously in 2007.
Okay. And what did you learn from police making contact with that person?
So that individual was Ryan Ackland, who was her California boyfriend that her family had testified about earlier, and he had confirmed that he had spoken with her.
Did you learn whether or not he recognized her voice?
Yes, it appeared to be.
Okay. Now, we've also heard testimony that Minot PD involved the FBI. You're familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay. And how is it that you were familiar with that?
Initially, the only information I had regarding any FBI involvement, there was a VICAP report attached to the case, which is an FBI division, the Violent Criminal Apprehension. But then in, I think it was August of 2022, a local FBI agent reached out to me to let me know that Mr. Becker, who had been Ms. Rice's attorney at that time, had reached out to them looking for some possible reports from the FBI involving the BAU, or the Behavioral Analysis Unit. He said they didn't have any BAU reports, but they did have some FBI reports, and I asked if he would please send those to me because we did not have them as part of the case file.
Okay. And so what did you learn from receiving those reports?
From those reports, it really was mostly they had conducted some follow-up interviews to assist the Minot Police Department. There was a letter in there where Detective Barnard had requested some assistance, giving them a brief synopsis of the case.
Okay. And what was the time frame for that letter from Detective Barnard?
I believe the letter for that request for assistance was in 2009.
Okay. And how about the interviews that the FBI assisted with? What was the time frame for those?
Those were conducted in 2008 or 2009.
So fair to say early in the investigation.
Yes.
Sergeant, you were present for the testimony of William May and Christina Imhoff, correct?
Correct.
And you're aware that there's no records of the statements from them, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. What did you learn about why there was no statements?
I really don't know why there's no statements. It would appear there was a breakdown in communication somewhere.
Were you with the PD at that point in time that those statements were made by those two?
No.
Okay. Now, to be clear, were there no statements or were there no records?
No records that they had contacted the police department.
And I think we've already established, you'd said previously that there were some other items that have been missing from the original case file, is that right?
Correct.
Such as?
audio recordings of interviews.
Okay. That were conducted by BCI and
Correct.
other agencies. Okay. Now, Sergeant, you had also alluded to lots of DNA had been collected, samples had been collected from various people, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And why was that?
The investigators were just doing their due diligence and trying to check off all the boxes that they came across in their investigation.
All right. Now, you were present for Amy Gebhardt's testimony, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you were present when Mr. Sand was asking her about male-specific DNA under Anita's fingernail, one of her fingernails on her right hand?
Correct.
Okay. What's your understanding about whether or not there's a timestamp on DNA?
There is no timestamp on DNA.
Sergeant, what are investigative holdbacks?
Those are items that are particular to the case that are not released to the public
Okay. And why is that done?
to ensure the integrity of the investigation. So if somebody comes forward at a later point that may have some information, you can verify if that is information that they knew independently or if it was something that they learned from the public.
Okay. Was the fact that Anita had been stabbed an investigative holdback?
No.
What were the investigative holdbacks in this case?
From what I was able to see in any of the media releases that I read, they did not release the fact that the screen was cut. And I don't believe they released the exact time that she was believed to have been stabbed.
Was any information released with regards to the condition or position of the body?
No.
How about any information with regards to the scene itself?
No.
Okay. How about how Anita was dressed?
No.
Not released.
Not released.
Now, Detective, Sergeant, you were able to go through Anita's text message history, correct?
Correct.
Who had she been texting with shortly before her death?
Michael Van?
Okay. Is that the individual known as Money Mike?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And generally, what was the content of those conversations?
It was just kind of a friend relationship. I think they kind of were talking about, maybe moving beyond friendship, but nothing really intimate.
Did he and Anita exchange what they were doing at that point in time?
Yes.
Okay. And what did she say that she had been doing?
She had made mention that she was feeling ill, and she was either going to take a bath or a shower to maybe feel better.
Okay. And was there any kind of physical evidence that Anita had taken a shower?
No.
Okay. So that was pieced together from text messages, is that right?
Correct, yes.
Now, Sergeant, I know there's been a lot of talk about cold justice.
Yes.
You were assigned to this case before cold justice came on, is that correct?
Correct.
Whose idea was it to bring in cold justice?
I have no exact knowledge. It was someone in administration, not me. I would assume it was a captain or a chief.
Someone above your pay grade, right?
Correct.
All right. What did you get told with regards to working with cold justice?
That they were going to bring them in to assist with this case and that I was going to help them.
Okay. And what kind of resources did cold justice provide?
They were able to provide, additional personnel to help us conduct all these interviews that needed to be done, and really just to help us find people that had moved on or were no longer around.
Who particularly from Cold Justice did you work with?
Mostly I work with Kelly Ziegler, a little bit with Steve Spingola, but mostly with Kelly.
And to your knowledge, what was Steve Spingola's occupation?
He was a retired lieutenant from the Milwaukee Police Department.
Do you know what unit he was with?
He, from what I understand, he had spent time in multiple units, but he had also spent a lot of time in a homicide unit.
When did Cold Justice come to Minot?
In March of 2022.
How long were they there?
I think around 10 days.
And what was the purpose of them coming to town?
To film for their show.
To your knowledge, had they had access to the case file before they came to town?
Yes, they were given the entire case file prior to coming to Minot.
Do you know approximately how far in advance they were given that?
I don't. I believe it was maybe January of 2022, but I really don't know the exact date.
So quite likely a couple of months.
Yes.
Now we heard Detective Talbot testify with regards to Cold Justice having a list of people to interview.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that more?
Yes. So when they came, they had researched the case file and they had a list of individuals who they thought should possibly be re-interviewed. We went through that list with them, and we gave them our input. There was a couple of people that we crossed off the list because we didn't think they were relevant. I know there was at least one person they had on the list that we knew to be deceased and we're not going to be able to re-interview.
So you had some input into the re-interviewing, is that correct?
Yes.
Was Cold Justice calling the shots?
No.
Now, as particularly with regards to homicide investigations, you review the evidence, then what step do you take?
You have to, it's like a puzzle. You have to go through all of the pieces that you're given and figure out how they fit together and what is extraneous information that doesn't fit into the puzzle.
Okay. And that happens, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Minot PD, did you receive a number of false leads?
Yes.
Quite a few, in fact.
Yes.
Did you review all of those again?
We reviewed them as much as we could, the ones that we believe may have needed more follow-up.
Okay. Were those followed up initially in the initial investigation from what you could review?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Were persons of interest identified in this case?
Yes.
Could you please tell us who those persons of interest were?
Excuse me. They had identified Marty Annell as a person of interest, Nichole Rice, or Thomas at the time, as a person of interest. They thought Tyler Schmaltz was a person of interest. They thought Michael Vann was a person of interest. There were multiple.
Okay. I'd like to go through these people one by one. Actually, first off, let me ask, what is a person of interest?
A person of interest is just someone that you have identified that has a link in some way to this person or this case or this incident, and you need to investigate and decide if there's any evidentiary value to raise them to the level of a suspect.
And what's the difference between a person of interest and a suspect?
A person of interest is typically just on the periphery. Again, it's just somebody you have to check off the box to make sure that you've looked into them as much as you can, and the suspect has more concrete connection to the case.
Okay. Now, we're talking about people who are identified as persons of interest right now. Okay. You indicated Marty Annell.
Yes.
All right. Marty's connection to the crime
Right.
was what?
That he was the maintenance man at the apartment complex and he had found the screen.
And how did law enforcement find the screen?
Marty told them about it and took them to it.
Why did Marty never rise to the level of a suspect?
He had no motive, no means. He had an alibi. Laura Knapp alibied him, said she was with him the entire weekend.
Did it ever become suspicious to the Minot PD when Marty committed suicide approximately 18 months after Anita's death?
I believe it did.
Okay. And was there follow-up that was done?
Yes.
And did that follow-up elevate Marty to the level of a suspect?
No.
Why not?
Again, there was nothing concrete there that connected him to this crime.
Okay. Was Minot PD able to satisfy themselves with regards to the reason for Marty's suicide?
Yes.
Okay. And what was that?
Well, as his sister and Laura have testified, there was a lot of issues going on with him in his life. There's a family history of suicide. He had a multitude of reasons why he may have committed suicide.
Did Marty cooperate with the investigation?
Yes.
Do you know approximately how many times he was interviewed?
I do not.
Was MPD ever able to verify anything in Vern Olson's statement about Marty having a gun or knife collection?
Not that I'm aware of.
You said that Michael Vann was a person of interest.
Yes.
Money Mike. All right. Why was he a person of interest?
Just because he was the individual who was contacting Anita, there was information that he was possibly romantically interested in her.
Okay. But he never made it to the level of suspect, did he?
No.
Why not?
He had an alibi. He had friends that had said that they were with him at the time that the murder happened.
And Minot PD was able to verify that alibi?
Yes.
Did your investigation determine whether or not Mr. Vann even had any idea where Anita lived?
No, he indicated that he had never been to her apartment and didn't know where she lived.
So Minot's PD struck him off their list.
Yes.
Mr. Vann, where is he these days?
He's deceased.
Okay. When did he pass?
I believe it was 2009.
Okay. And what was his cause of death, do you know?
He died from an asthma attack.
Tyler Schmaltz, another person of interest, right?
Yes.
Okay. Why was Tyler a person of interest?
I believe some people were throwing his name out, that he was infatuated with Anita, that he, may have been obsessed with her. So
Was there any indication of that in your investigation?
No.
Okay. What did the investigation unveil as to where Tyler was at around the time of Anita's death?
I believe he had said he was at his apartment playing online video games.
Okay. Now, we've established that Tyler lived in the same apartment complex as Anita and Nichole, correct?
Correct.
Who moved there first?
I believe he was in there first.
Okay. And did Tyler live with anybody?
He lived with his brother.
And the boys both lived in that apartment complex?
Yes.
All right. Were they in the same building as Anita?
No, there were 3 buildings to the north of where Anita and Nicole's apartment was.
Was Minot PD, through investigation, able to verify Tyler's alibi?
Yes.
Now, in reviewing Anita's phone records, both phone and text, call and text, were you able to determine what, if any, contact she had had with Tyler recently?
I didn't see any contact with Tyler in her phone.
Okay. It had been quite some time since they'd spoken.
Yes.
All right. You were present for questioning that involved a man running, right?
Correct.
All right. What do you know about this runner?
So I know that Becky Herman had contacted the police department, I believe it was the following day after the discovery of the body, to report that she had seen this individual running in the area.
Okay. And what came from that lead?
So she provided a description. Eventually, the police department enlisted the use of a sketch artist to create a sketch of what this person looked like. That was released to the media. And then subsequently, an individual came forward and said that, hey, that looks like me, and I was, in fact, running in that area on that date and time.
Okay. You observed the sketch, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe the person in the sketch?
To me, it looked like a possibly Hispanic male, short hair.
Okay. And did the person who came forward match that description?
Yes.
And were you able to determine if that person had any involvement whatsoever with this case?
He did not.
You've heard the name Devon Hall, right?
Yes.
And you've heard the name Jerome Vivier, right?
Yes.
Okay. What is your understanding of Minot PD's investigation of those two?
So early on in the investigation, like I said, they were following as many leads as they could. And when police had contact with Devon Hall on June 11th, which was just over a week after this homicide, they determined they should look into him as he is possibly a person of interest.
Okay. And what did that looking into him involved?
He was interviewed. His family, friends were all interviewed, and they went out to Wolf Point, Montana, where he was from, and interviewed individuals there.
Okay. Now, you said that Devon Hall was looked into for a break-in on June 11th. Is that right?
Yes,
Where in the city did that break-in occur?
that was on Sioux Street.
Is Sioux Street anywhere near Northgate Apartments?
No.
What was, to your understanding from the investigation, Devon Hall's condition when he was arrested?
He was intoxicated.
And do you know approximately how many times Devon Hall was interviewed?
I do not. It was multiple.
Okay. And you were present for Sergeant Goodman's testimony when he testified about going out to Montana to interview him again?
Correct.
What other efforts did Minot PD make with regards to corroborating Devon's rendition of accounts of where he was at or around the time of the murder?
Objection, narrative question, Your Honor.
Overruled. She just asked what they did, so she can answer that.
I know they tried to find train records from Amtrak. They, again, like I said, interviewed family and friends to corroborate his version of the weekend. They spoke with individuals in and around Wolf Point, Montana, other businesses, a hotel where they had stayed that weekend. They received a video from a family friend.
Okay. So I'm going to back you up a little bit. You said that they checked train records. Why did they check train records?
So the Devon Hall and Jerome Vivier and all of the rest of the family and friends among that group had been in Wolf Point, Montana that weekend. They had gone for high school graduation on Friday, June 1st. And then they were scheduled to return to Minot on the 2nd on the train. However, half of them were going to be on the train and some of them were going to be in a vehicle driven by Nova Wetzel. Nova's vehicle broke down, so they had to stay an extra day, which was confirmed by the hotel in Wolf Point, saying that Nova had a hotel room for June 1st and June 2nd. And then they eventually returned to Minot on Sunday, June 3rd on the train and in the vehicle.
Was there anything else that was corroborated by the hotel?
Yes, Detective Goodman spoke with an employee at the hotel to confirm again that Nova Wetsit had rooms reserved for them on Friday, June 1st and Saturday, June 2nd. And the hotel employee also commented that he had to call the police on Saturday night, June 2nd, because the boys had broken into the kitchen at the hotel.
So was Sergeant Goodman able to corroborate that police contact?
That I'm not sure.
Okay. But that was information that was, in fact, corroborated with the hotel.
Yes.
Now, you indicated that there was a video that had been received by from the family. What was that?
Nova Wetsit provided a video, a home movie that she had taken. She was recording the individuals when they were getting off the train at the Amtrak station in Minot.
Okay. And what date was that?
It was Sunday, June 3rd.
Approximately what time?
The train would have gotten in a little after 9 p.m., 9:20-ish.
Okay. And what family members got off that train?
There were several. Devon Hall was one of them. There was an Alyssa, Jake, and I'm sorry, I don't remember all of the names off the train.
Now, you're aware that Jerome Vivier had an arrest, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. For GSI. Do you remember the date of that GSI?
It was May 20th of 2007.
Okay. So Jerome would have been on bond at that point in time. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Are you aware of him leaving the state following that bond order?
Yes.
And what did your investigation uncover with regards to whether or not he could leave the state?
His attorney had petitioned the court to allow him to leave the state so he could attend his graduation in Fraser, Montana, and the judge granted that.
Did you look into the GSI that Jerome Vivier, I'm going to say committed because he was convicted of it, committed?
Just briefly, I don't know many of the details of it. I only know that the victim in that incident was a relative of his cousin, I believe.
Now, you're also familiar with Jerome Vivier's name being on the list from the 101 Club, as Mr. Sand had indicated previously to one of the officers, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Were you able to determine if he and Anita were at the 101 Club on the same evening?
According to that list, they were.
Okay. Were you able to determine if they came in at the same time?
I believe the times were not the same. They were off by a half hour, maybe an hour.
Okay. And how long before Anita's murder was that?
That was around that May timeframe when the GSI occurred, so it was a week or two.
Okay. And do you know the date of the contact at the club? Or the date that they were both at the club?
May 19th, maybe?
Okay. And he was charged with the GSI that occurred May 20th?
Yes.
Were you able to, did the investigation determine whether or not Jerome had any contact with Anita at Club 101?
No.
Okay. It didn't determine that?
There was no indication of any contact between the two of them.
Okay. Is there any indication that they interacted at all?
No.
Any indication that he followed her home?
No.
That he had any idea where she lived?
No.
Now, we've heard a lot about this knife and Devon Hall's connection to it.
Yes.
Okay. What did the investigation determine with regards to that knife and Devon Hall's connection?
So he had at one point said he had a knife like that that he had taken from Jerome Vivier in Wolf Point, that he had it for maybe a day and then he gave it back or left it in Jerome's house in Wolf Point. Other individuals and family members of his had stated it was a knife similar to the one recovered in this case.
Okay. Similar?
Yes.
Okay. How did it differ?
The design on the handle was different.
Did there come a point in time that MPD was able to actually definitively state that that wasn't the same knife?
Yes, at some point in time, I believe it was Nova Wetzel, had turned over a knife to the police department that was the knife that they were all referring to, which had a completely different design on it.
And what did she do with that knife?
She turned it over to the police department.
Okay. Now, you're familiar with Devon Hall's criminal history, correct?
Correct.
All right. What typically is he getting arrested for?
The history that I've seen, he seems to have a habit of getting intoxicated and breaking into homes. I believe he may have sexually assaulted some females.
When was that?
2010. I don't remember the exact date. It was after 2007.
Okay. Is it fair to say he keeps getting caught?
He does.
What does that tell you about his skill as a cat burglar?
He may not be very good at it.
Now, you indicated that when he was arrested on June 11th, 2007, he was highly intoxicated.
Yes.
Okay. Can you be more specific?
Well, I wasn't present. I'm only going off of the reports that I read for that case. He was staying in an apartment with Nova Wetzel on Sioux Street. I believe her apartment was in the 800 building, Sioux Street. And then the building that he was arrested for breaking into was the 804 building, which is directly behind the 800 building. So it appeared that he was just intoxicated and ended up going into the wrong apartment.
And he was found with a knife at that apartment, wasn't he?
Yes.
What was your understanding of where he got that knife from?
So reading the report, he was found in one apartment, and the homeowner there chased him out of the apartment, and then another tenant in the building actually followed suit. They chased him down, and there was a brief altercation somewhere. He then ran into the building and entered a different apartment, where he was later found hiding in a closet with a kitchen knife that he had grabbed out of the kitchen in his pocket.
Do you have any idea where he was?
He thought he was in Williston. He kept calling the police officers Williston pigs.
How far from Minot is Williston?
It's about a 2-hour drive.
During that time that he had broken in on June 11th, did he injure anybody?
No.